Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group. At Business Success Consulting Group, we create custom processes and tailor-made business systems so businesses can thrive and grow. All right, and today's podcast is Krish Ramineni. Hi, Krish.
Hi there, Adi. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
Absolutely. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too, because Krish, you are the founder and you're the CEO of Fireflies.ai. And what is Fireflies? Well, I've been using Fireflies now for definitely over a year. And Fireflies is basically let me see if I describe it correctly. Okay, so it's an artificial intelligence virtual assistant. Basically, it is a note taker. It's a virtual note taker that joins any virtual meeting and records and transcribes what you're saying, the conversation. And it's very easy to then tag specific important sentences or important things you're saying, or like the content creation. You can tag the content creation. It's amazing. It works fantastic. You can say, if you want the artificial intelligence virtual assistant to join every meeting, just specific meetings internally, externally, etc. And it gives you this really accurate transcription. I think it's one of the most accurate transcriptions that I've seen by artificial intelligence. And you can use it. You can have sales calls without having to take copious notes because it's all there. Or you can have meetings with your clients and it's all there. So I'm definitely very impressed by it. So that's why I'm so excited to interview you and really dig into that, the product, how you build a company, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you summarized it well. And that's a good sign that when a customer or a user can explain Fireflies in a few sentences and describe it just the way I would have, I'm really happy that you're getting that value out of it. And thank you so much for the kind words.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for actually developing that product. It's definitely a time saver and it's great automation. So I'm curious, how did Fireflies come about? Like, how did you actually develop the idea and what made you want to develop it?
Yeah. So previously, before Fireflies, I was at Microsoft. I was working around all of the collaboration products. So Microsoft Office, Word, Excel. We even worked on some things with the Skype team. So for me, collaboration software was like where I started. That's my roots. And we were working on several things. And one of the common things as a product manager at Microsoft is you're having lots of meetings. And in general, corporates everywhere, you're having lots of meetings. And the thought was about how do we make meetings more efficient? That was one point of view. And, we noticed some of the execs have their own business admins that would come in, organize everything, send out emails of notes and all that. And I was like, hey, it'd be great if we can give that to every single knowledge worker in the world that has meetings. And, we don't even have to think about total addressable market or anything like that. It's not a business problem, but it's just like, hey, this is like a need that can be fulfilled. It's usually because it's very expensive to have transcription done. Or notes done, or to hire a real person to do it. So how can we build a virtual agent that can do that? So that was the starting point of Fireflies, or like the initial factor. But before that, we had iterated on several different products, 5-6 different products after I left Microsoft. But the common theme was always the same. How do you unlock knowledge from conversations? And before, we thought maybe we should do that for emails. Maybe we should do that for chat and messaging. We built chatbots. But then the reason we went back to voice again and meetings was there was no system in place to remember all of your conversations. Because if you leave that meeting room, you forget everything within the next day, right? And then you also tend to have the same meetings with people because, so-and-so didn't attend. And we realized that creating a system of record for meetings is a great starting point. Just capturing everything, transcribing everything, making it searchable. And it's from that point onward, we said, okay, let's do summarization, let's do note taking, what can we do after the meeting, right? Maybe we can fill out your CRM so you don't have to manually enter that data afterwards. So that's like been the journey. It's that the product has evolved as a result of that.
Great. So how do most people use Fireflies? What do you find?
Today, most people are using Fireflies because they want to pay attention on meetings. They don't want to take notes. They want to remember everything. It's like their second brain where they can go back to a conversation they had 6 months ago and recall it, review it within 5 minutes. They can skim the transcript. They can click on any part of the meeting and review it. We also have smart search filters. So Fireflies can, with a click of a button, show you potential action items where you talked about dates, pricing, objections. You can even build your own tracker. So if you want to see if like you're discussing competitors or you're discussing integrations or you're discussing some important things that you care about, we can flag that very quickly for you in the call. So search, skimming, sharing, all of that, like it's like a collaboration experience there. And then a lot of people use Fireflies with integrations as well. So they might want to have those recaps and notes sent to Slack or saved to Salesforce or to their Dropbox, or they want to say something on a meeting like a voice command and then have that trigger and create a ticket or story in Asana or Trello. So we are thinking about
an example of that. That's actually really interesting.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do so you basically can give a voice command like what? Like, give me an example in order to create something in Asana.
Yeah, you can create your own voice commands. The nice thing about Fireflies is it's very modular and it can be customized for every person's needs. But I can say something like, Fireflies, make a note to send the report by the end of this month. And, make a note is a trigger within my system. And for you, it could be something else like write down or please remember or remind me. And then I can, when I go turn on my Asana integration, I say, hey, when they say make a note, go create a ticket in Asana and fill out the rest of the information. So we can do it's almost like programmatic, right? Like think about if you had Amazon Alexa or, the Google Home or Siri, and you can without writing code, define what you want it to do. And it's used in a business use case like meetings. That's essentially what Fireflies has become.
Amazing. You see, you learn something new every day. That is like, or at least I strive in order to learn something new every day. And I've been using Fireflies, but I did not use that feature. So I'm going to definitely integrate it. Do you integrate with ClickUp?
That is on the list. It's heavily requested. So we will hopefully in the next couple of months have ClickUp as well. ClickUp and Monday.com are two project management systems that we have. But the voice commands feature are available today for Trello and Asana, and you can customize your own voice commands. We also have a Zapier integration. So if there's any we have like 40 plus integrations, but if there's any integration that we don't have, we have a Zapier integration that will allow you to do something similar. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, good. So let me know when you have that integration with ClickUp, because I will definitely use it. It's like, it's amazing. I mean, it just, imagine you're in a meeting. I mean, you imagined it already because you created it, but I just got excited because I'm looking at it. Okay, so I'm in a meeting and I always give my clients action items and I try to say action items because then it's very easy for me to scan it throughout when I look at the transcript, right? But if I can say like something like a voice command and then it immediately goes into ClickUp and reminds me to do that, I mean, that would be like amazing. So super excited about that. And okay, good. So that's basically the background of how Fireflies.ai came to be and users who uses it, etc. But we are all about systems, and you did a fantastic job when did you found the company? What year?
Yeah, so the company was originally founded in 2016. That's when we were working on different products. And then 2018 is when we started focusing on the voice and meeting assistant product. And then we launched in 2020 from beta to public.
Amazing. Before or after the pandemic?
Right before the pandemic, January 2020. And then 2 months later, we're in the middle of the pandemic.
Which I'm sure was actually, the pandemic is never beneficial, but in terms of like people having to go on meetings on Zoom, etc. So probably it will just increase the usage. That's when I probably start using it because it was, that I found myself instead of having 8 meetings a day with clients, in person or over the phone, it was always via Zoom, just like that. So it definitely was needed. So, there are two questions that I'm curious about. and I'm going to ask you both, but let's start with one. So first of all, it's the leaving corporate, leaving Microsoft and becoming your own, entrepreneur, like being basically founding a startup, right? So having the courage to do that. And I'm really curious about that journey. And also systematizing and building and scaling the business, because now you have about 90, 100 employees, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's all virtual, correct?
Yeah, we're a 100% remote team. And I would say that with the pandemic, it showed people that you can build large remote companies, some of them who have gone public, like GitLab. So it is possible. And we were remote from day one, even before the pandemic. So for us, that was just the culture DNA that we had in place. But definitely to be a remote company, you need to have a lot more processes in place because you're not in person. So there's a lot of this instant communication that's missed. So there's a lot more documentation, a lot more process, a lot more regimented structure that ends up having to be there. But if you can have that in place, it'll be easier for you to scale up versus when like a in-person company, I think for them to scale up, right? You need new floors, you need new buildings, you need new culture, you need to train people differently. People need to be in person. And so that's definitely something I've noticed where it's harder to get off the ground a remote company, but once you do, it can scale more effectively.
For sure. So let's start with my first question. Okay, so you left Microsoft to start your own company. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I was actually not even supposed to be doing startups at that point. I left Microsoft after having a great time. I thought I learned a lot. I got promoted within the first 8 months, and I was just constantly learning. Right, that was like my starting point. And then I was actually supposed to go off to grad school. I was supposed to go off to Cambridge, and I've always wanted to study in London in the UK. And so that was actually the thing. And then I had a few months of break before that, and so I flew out to Boston. Was basically at MIT for the summer. And then my co-founder at the time, we had been working on several different things while we were in school, hackathons, projects, and he was also finishing up school. So we had a bunch of free time that summer before we went off to do our respective things. And that's when we started working on different NLP projects, different ML projects. And we use the same name.
Let's clarify those acronyms for those people that do not, the entrepreneurs out there that do not know what those acronyms mean.
Yeah. So natural language processing and machine learning. So anything related to text analysis, sentiment analysis, experimenting with insights around that. Like we wanted to build ways to better understand conversations and communication. And, you can quantify numbers, right? You can create beautiful reports and dashboards for numbers, but text, like how do you analyze text? How do you quantify text? And how do you quantify unstructured data? So text is one of the hardest unstructured data to quantify. And so that was something we started working on. And then once you start tapping into that, you come up with all these interesting use cases and different scenarios. And conversations and natural language understanding led to voice, and then voice led to meetings, and then meetings led to the formation of what Fireflies is today.
Fantastic. Okay. So you didn't end up going to Cambridge, or did you?
I didn't. Yeah, I went headfirst into the startup world. We moved back to San Francisco, and the first 1 year we were very, very frugal, bootstrapped, very lean. For almost a year and a half, we got some small checks from accelerators that helped us get going. It was just a 2-person company for almost a year and a half. And then we slowly started building and then, going from there.
So what changed from being a small company to start expanding? What was that point?
Yeah. So one was we wanted to stay small until we validated the technology and validated the users. So once we got our first 100 users and started seeing them use it, adopt it, we realized that we had to start building the product for scale. Initially in the early days, you start hacking things together, things that will not scale past maybe a couple hundred users, maybe 1,000 users. And so we started thinking about the architecture. I think voice over IP, streaming, all of this is really hard at scale. And it's definitely a much harder thing to build in this space than if you were building a dashboard with a form and you fill out some fields, right? So there's a lot of real-time data. It's heavy. Uptime is super important. We have a thing at Fireflies that we say I might be late to a meeting, but Fireflies has to show up on time every single day. Fireflies doesn't get a day off on holidays. So that culture of 24/7 SLAs, ops, building our support team. So all of those things we
SLAs?
realized required that. Yeah.
Let's explain SLAs.
Like service uptime, like how fast you are able to, when a customer has an incident or an issue, how fast you're able to get there and help them out. Yeah, all of those things. Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. Good. So you validated it, you saw that it worked. Then who was your first employee?
Yeah, so we started hiring engineers. Those were our first employees, and then our first support person, and to help answer support tickets, because in the early days it was just me and Sam answering support tickets. Also, as the code was being written and then the product was being built, so we were just wearing multiple hats in the early days. So we had engineers, and to this day, our co-founder still writes code, and our CTO is actively involved. I'm still involved in almost all the product and design and all of these decisions. So yeah, it was engineers and the support. That's primarily what our team is. Even today, most of Fireflies is engineers. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so let's talk about being remote and building that culture. So you started by being remote and you maintain being remote. I mean, that was definitely within your vision. That's what you wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
So what are key lessons or key components of a successful remote team?
Yeah. I think for remote, it's the culture of being data-driven, culture of executing, and a culture of being accountable. When you're hiring someone that's somewhere far away, this is the most important trait is, can you trust them to do something when you're not 24/7 paying attention or have to sit next to them, right? A lot of times they're high performers, but they need to be constantly handheld. And in a remote environment, you can't have that. So we optimized and we made a lot of mistakes along the way, and we continue to improve on this. But we tend to hire people that are self-starters, driven, motivated, accountable. And I think that's the biggest secret to successfully building remote teams is because now that you have that person, you're going to hire other people around them, and you're going to build teams around them. And if they themselves are not showing that high level of discipline, then all the people around them will fall, right? And so that is something the amount of freedom that you have as an individual in a remote company, right? You can go get lunch whenever you want. You can go out whenever you want. But is your stuff getting done, right? We're not sitting there monitoring, are you at your desk 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day? Are you showing up on time? Those are not the things. The things we measure is are you delivering the output of work? And if that's not, let's figure it out, right? What's going wrong and how you feel back into it. So the secret to building remote teams, I think, starts with good people that are accountable. They don't need to know everything, but at least having them have this culture of wanting to learn and accountability, organization. Those are some basic things that are much harder to train. I can teach someone about a system or something technical, but if they're not coming in with that discipline and that organizational skills and ability to communicate and write, that's much harder to train. So that would be probably the key to what we look for when we're hiring.
For sure. So how do what's your system for hiring those people?
Yeah, so we have, a sequence of interviews. We have coding exams. We also have, multiple touch points where the recruiter will have a conversation, the team manager will have a conversation, the IC will have a conversation. Sometimes it'll go up to the leadership team who will have a conversation. And you start realizing through those conversations, the way they communicate, the passion that they show, the things that they're able to show on the sample assessments and exams that we give. We are very data driven. We start putting all those things together. We compute a score based on that. And then we have multiple teams evaluate and discuss where that person would be a good fit on, if at all. And we try to hire with that sort of, unbiased approach where you want to basically use that scoring system and you want to use that method of comparing people, right? When you're looking at candidate A versus candidate B, are there some factors that make one candidate better than the other? And then how are you quantifying that? How are you getting rid of bias in that hiring process? We go to the extreme where we don't even have our cameras on when we talk. We don't need to see that person. We've hired many candidates where I didn't have my camera on and they didn't have their camera on. We've hired them, right? There's many folks like where for us, those sort of soft things are not as important as your ability to communicate, your ability to relate, and your ability to like deliver. And so, yeah, we try to remove as much bias as possible in those hiring decisions.
Wow, that's great. Anything else to that method that you would like to share that you think is important that you learned throughout? Well, let's look at mistakes. I mean, that always helps. Like, what mistakes have you done in the past and how did you rectify it? Not to continue making those mistakes.
That's always something that I think about. One is we tend to think that experience matters a lot, right? When we think that, oh, this person did something very similar, they have a lot of experience. But I found that people that come with that mindset saying, I know everything, I've done this, not always do that well. Like usually what I look for is now more than experience, like competency and skill and grit and the ability to, like, I always feel like that type of person can excel and outmatch someone that comes in saying, I already have experience. So I think experience is good. It's valid and it's important, right? When you're doing site reliability engineering where you need to build high scale systems, experience is absolutely valuable. But if you have a person that is not thorough, or they don't cross the T's, dot the I's, and check all the little things and make mistakes along the way, and some things that are careless, right? That's like a lot worse. So it doesn't matter how much experience you have if you're not willing to put in the effort and be caring. So attention to detail, willingness to learn, I feel over time trumps, right? And like sheer like IQ sometimes and like is great, but if you don't couple that with good work ethic, it doesn't mean much. So
for sure. That's great. Thank you, Krish, for that. That's definitely very good advice. So now let's talk about the importance of processes in scaling, right? Because you told me, you touched on it a little bit before in terms of having processes and systems in place is key for scaling. And you definitely scale your company because, we're talking about launching it and going. So in 2020, when you actually launched a product, how many employees did you have at a time?
Probably around like 10 or a little bit more than that, 10 to 15, I would say. Yeah.
So that's really scaling because you went from 10 to almost 100 during a tough time of the pandemic, right? So it's not business as usual, obviously, because people definitely had, we all been there, so we know. So it's definitely a scaling action. So how and why? I mean, I guess, let's talk about processes and how do processes help scaling? Like why a company has to have processes in order to scale?
Yeah. I think the short answer is you don't want to be repeating the same thing 10 times, 20 times to people. So we like to document, we like to create videos, we like to create onboarding material. If I'm doing something to onboard a potential employee, the next time we hire another employee, I don't want to be doing that same process again. So that's actually the reason why we use Fireflies, because if I said something on a meeting, I don't want to repeat myself. So I'll go into Fireflies, create sound bites, and then create a playlist and then have them say, hey, review these meetings, review these parts, and you should be up to speed. Today, even when we hire folks for the customer facing team, I say, hey, go listen to a few of these calls I've had with clients. These are the things that you're going to need to understand. And then they go through 4 or 5 and they're up to speed. So for me, I like the idea of not having to do the same thing over and over again, right? Being repetitive. And so you need to have processes in place because if you are going from 10 to 100, you don't want to do something 100 times over and over again, right? Everything as simple as onboarding, adding them to Slack, to setting up payroll, to training them on a particular thing. Like we expect every person that joins Fireflies to know the product inside out and actually use it, right? Like how do you go through that? What sort of training material do you put in? What sort of learning management system do you have in place? How are you holding people accountable to that, right? We have like the first 30 days, there's like you're learning the ropes, but also within the first 2 weeks, we want you to get involved and actually deliver, your first line of code or your first support ticket. So there's a lot of those things that we think about where the learning has to be practical, right? Like if we can't just have someone sit and just say, read all day, but it's like, okay, you understand this? Let's apply it right now. So we move fast. I think the scale, the cadence of like, okay, if it took someone 10 days to do this, how can we do this in 5 days next time? Well, in order to do that, you have to go look at your process. Where are the bottlenecks? what are the parts that were unclear, and who are the people that were left out during that process. And then you kind of go back, you back channel, you understand, you simplify, and you rinse and repeat the process. So when we think about building process, I was always against process in the early days when I was in Microsoft. I was like, oh, why do I have to go through all these things? And like, the process shouldn't limit you from fulfilling your potential, but the process should help you know what you need to do so that you don't have to think about the process every time. It just becomes second nature, right? It's instinctual. Oh, we're rolling out something new. Well, I need to go document it. I need to go do a feature announcement. I need to go write a newsletter. That should be like second nature versus we just rolled out a new feature and then no one's announced it. No one knows about it. The support team doesn't know about it. The product team doesn't know about it. Then that's where things fail. So process helps avoid miscommunication. Process helps improve onboarding. And then the process helps people that are already really good do better. Process hurts people who are usually disorganized and need to be constantly reminded, right? So that's how I think about being organized and setting up ops. You know.
Very true. So when you were at Microsoft, you go, oh no, process. You used to be against processes. So let's analyze that a little bit in terms of like, because it will help others understand like, okay, yes, this is the point where I was and why processes are helpful. So what do you think contributed to you thinking, oh my gosh, processes, I don't want to deal with processes?
Yeah. I think there are some times where process limits someone from moving faster than they would like to. And, what I've always found is that sometimes process can be layers of bureaucracy, layers of approvals, layers of things that you need to do before you do things. On that end, I always wanted to move fast. And even at Fireflies, we want to move fast. But you need to have some of those checks and balances in place because you don't want to be rolling something out to production or to the live that has a lot of issues. So process helps with quality control sometimes. Process helps with the education part, where you don't want to like be overconfident and do something that doesn't, reflect positively, right, for your customers or for your team. So in that regard, that's what I've changed when I'm on the other side now and running the team and managing people, where process is a guardrail, but process should not be a blocker. So there are times when we remove layers of processes and instead put other things in place. There are times when you have to just do it and learn from trial and error. And there's times where you don't want to do those things and make the same mistakes over again, right? So that's how I think about it and why I probably do it now versus when I was back at Microsoft.
Absolutely. I think you brought up excellent points in terms of like you're looking at it from the viewpoint of the leader of the team to the team to make sure that's how you coordinate between team members. But the point that you brought up in terms of like you have to have a balance between basically a balance on how the process is written. So it does not block, it's not bureaucratic. It doesn't put stops. If a process is putting stop to actual production, then it's not a good process and it has to be reviewed. It has to be revised, right? The process, really for me, a good process actually results in more freedom to act as opposed to less freedom to act, right? Because it allows you to act. It gives you the freedom to act in the right channel to actually achieve the product that you want. So it might be restricting at times because you can't just do whatever you want. But if you follow it, you will actually get the freedom to be more creative, the freedom to create more or to do more, etc. So that's where I see the balance in terms of like when you're writing a process, when you have process in the company, they don't restrict, but definitely put those guidelines in place.
Yeah. For us, it's like there are situations where I think about process and culture. So culture in the sense that, do you know that you can act on your own without having to check with someone because you understand the culture and you understand what the goals are? So if someone wants to go run an experiment, if someone wants to go do something, if you have the same values, the same culture and same understanding of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to better, then that helps, because process also sometimes helps folks not have to constantly be waiting on their manager for approval, waiting on someone else, because they're like, okay, this is the company's goals. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is within the guidelines of what I need to do. And now that I've internalized that, I don't need to wait. And my boss or my manager is perfectly happy with me acting independently because there's that level of trust that we're following within that same paradigm. And yeah, so that's where we want to give people freedom. You don't want to micromanage people. And the only time you can do that is if you really trust them. And then if you respect their ability to execute, right? So I've found that like the best employees, the people that I love working with are, we talk about it, if there's some differences, we understand it, we filter it, and then they're like, they go and run their playbook, right? And I'm not putting my finger in and saying, no, change this, don't change that. So I'm acting more as an editor rather than a creator.
Right.
And that's like when you're successful. The times when like employees are not like the best to work with, or folks that are not the most optimal to work with, is you look at it and you're like, oh, what is this? This is completely off. And then you're like, I can't edit this. I need to like scrap it and build it from scratch. And sometimes it's your fault. Sometimes it's the person, they didn't understand the context that well. Other times it's like, oh, if they had more context and better process and knew what they need to do, maybe they would have delivered a better output. So there are times where like I need to learn to better to coach, teach, educate. There are other times where like, oh, that was not a good hiring decision because this person, even if with all this process and learning and resources in place, they're still just going to ignore and do whatever they want. So yeah.
Right. So that's also a way to see, basically to weed out the people that are not shouldn't be part of your culture or not a good fit for your culture.
Yeah.
Where those processes, where do they sit? Where do you house them? In what platform or?
Yeah. So a lot of it is in documentation. We use Notion, we use Google Drive, we record videos, we use Slack extensively. A lot of times we like to do, I'm more of an auditory visual learner, so I like to listen and hear things. A lot of our process, like Fireflies sometimes serves as our like learning system. We have all these like Firefly meetings and recordings and transcripts that we save saying, hey, if you're new to the company and you're in this role, sales, listen to these. If you're in marketing, listen to these. If you're an engineer, go listen to these. Now you'll understand why a year ago we made this architectural decision. So when you come in with questions, you'll have a lot more context, right? It's so much of it is context. And sometimes the reason managers are able to make the decisions they do, it's not because they're any smarter or it's that they're magically executing better. It's because they're able to aggregate all of the context and make things easier for folks. So I think context is king in that regard.
Absolutely. I agree. I'm a big fan of process documentation platforms, and I use several of those with our clients because it's also housing them in one place, in a central place. So using Fireflies is a great idea in terms of like, okay, so this is where the meetings are. So you can keep them there. And obviously it makes sense because this is a platform that you use. So, but I also really like any platform, any process documentation platform, because it helps to create a centralized point where you can actually create like an online manual, online playbook. So cool. So Krish, what's the future like? Where are we going?
Yeah, for us, we want to make Fireflies a more open and modular and customizable platform, and we're driving towards that. So we want to integrate with a lot of different services. We want to allow different users, different use cases. So people in recruiting can use Fireflies in a particular way. People in sales can use Fireflies in a particular way. We also look at like the value we can provide on top, right? So beyond just note taking and summaries and organization and a knowledge base, Fireflies is a knowledge base of all your conversations. We want to provide insights and analytics and conversational intelligence. So for us, we were evolving as a company as well from being this productivity note taker platform to a platform for teams and managers and all these folks to organize all their company's voice, right? And then to providing insights. So that's like the evolution of Fireflies, and meetings is just a starting point, but we want to integrate and pull audio, voice wherever it is. So all of your voice conversations. So you can now pull your Loom videos into Fireflies.
I saw that today. I was looking at a Loom video and then I got the little icon of Fireflies arrive. So that's great.
Yeah. So we're having that. And then we're building out better organizational structures. So we rolled out channels version 1, and then we'll have like a way for you to organize your meetings into different folders or different channels, private, public, very similar to Slack. So you can have all your HR meetings in one channel and make them private, or you can have all your sales meetings in one channel, all your customer feedback in one channel. So for us, we want to create that organizational system around your meetings and all of your knowledge. And over the time, right? Like after 1 year, after 2 years, after 3 years, that knowledge that you have in your organization, even if some of your existing teammates leave, new folks that come in, other people that come in, it's a very precious source of information. And that's what we're trying to make Fireflies and become.
I think it's great. And to that point, I just, you made me think about, there can be information is how you use it, right? You talked about like even when you're onboarding, it's applying it, right? It's not just learning the information, because I think people can go into information overload. Like I had a client that he was recording all of his Zoom meetings, but they're all in folders and they weren't categorized. So you can bring somebody on and you can say, yeah, I have this great knowledge base of 100 calls on Zoom. So what are you going to do? They start listening to each one. I mean, let's say each one is an hour to hour and a half. So that's 100 hours. That's no, but I mean, it's basically like if you didn't do anything for the 40 hours that you work, for 2.5 weeks, you will just listen to Zoom calls, right? So, and you don't know which one comes first and the importance. That's why I see using Fireflies with tagging, with being able to search, with being able to actually categorize it, will make that information actually usable.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And think about it this way. Sometimes those files, they're not in the cloud when you record locally. They're 200, 300, 400, sometimes 1 gig in terms of size. And you have to now upload it. You have to like edit it, or you have to review it. You don't have a marker in place where to go. So just that that's why a lot of our free users love using Fireflies, is because it's all organized automatically for me. It's easily shareable with one click. And then I can pay for more transcription. I can pay for more integrations and more storage and all of that. But the value is there. Like we have a forever free tier, and then we have the paid tiers. But people realize this is just a better way to organize their meetings. And then it goes from there. So it's great that you're able to say that. And that's exactly our goal and vision for Fireflies.
Yes, it totally is. So I guess it's more of a case study for you as it is for me, in terms of like, I wanted to talk to you to really get, I really admire the fact that you build a company so fast, and it's such a great product that helps people, right? Because it is a productivity tool. I'm all about productivity tools and systematizing business. And this is a key productivity tool that works. It doesn't, it's easy to use, right? It doesn't require a lot of training, and it doesn't require a lot of extra to actually being productive. So it's kind of like the unproductivity in order to be productive. So this is very easy to use. And the fact that it shows up to all of my meetings, I just love that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome that you say that. And with productivity tools, it has to fit within the workflow, right, of the tools that you use. Like Fireflies works with Calendly. It works with your Google Calendar, Outlook Calendar. It works with Zoom. And then let's say your next meeting's on Google Meet, it'll work, or Microsoft Teams. So we think constantly around like, for productivity to be truly productive, you shouldn't have to go out of your way, right? And so that's something we think about.
Excellent. Well, Krish, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it was really, really pleasant to talk to someone that uses Fireflies, and then be able to share the story, because it just brings a whole new level of context. So I absolutely enjoyed it.
For sure. Oh, and I need to give a shout out to Carl Cox, because I've seen you on his podcast, and Carl Cox is the founder of 40 Strategy, and he basically, I saw you on his podcast, so I reached out, and that's how we met. So definitely a shout out for Carl for interviewing you first.
Yeah, we had a conversation because our team had reached out. Such a wonderful guy. Gave a ton of great feedback and just was super helpful. And then I was on his podcast, and through him, I got connected to you, and I'm here. So it's a small world.
Definitely. All right, Krish, thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.